middle bit.
Much use.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Good evening, Erev Tov. So I'm going to use this opportunity to talk about one of my favorite topics. Yeah. So a few people asked me about something which came out this morning, and last week we mentioned the fact that there was the Ministry of Health gave approval to one of the companies that's making cultivated meat, lab-grown meat. We've spoken about it in the past, but there are so many different aspects to this and so many issues to this question. A few things here maybe that we haven't said before. First of all, it's just great to have news coming out of Israel that's got nothing to do with the war. As actually, the company that got the regulation, they put out a message about it. And they said, we're happy to uncelebrate. It was quite moving. They said, with everything that's going on at the moment, it's an international company, and they said we can't celebrate right now, so we are uncelebrating. The time will come, but this is, with everything that's going on, Israel continues to be a leader in technology and innovation and all these areas. And of course, the question that concerns us is in terms of halachically, what are the implications of this? And we have a situation right now which maybe certainly have a situation we've never had before. But in terms of the way the halachic process works, in terms of the way that it works together with the technology and the innovation and the things that are happening, in the past, it was always, by definition and by nature, it had to be reactionary to a certain extent, meaning something happened, something was created, especially with technology going the way it's going and proceeding at the pace and the speed, which is only getting quicker and quicker all the time. This is what happened. These are the facts. Okay, this is the invention. This is the technology. Now, what can we do with it? Is it kosher? Is it not? A, B, C, etc. Now, because of the way things work and as quickly as things are developing, but because you have instant communication across the globe, because of the way things are, so it could be, and it's possible, that the other question is not just how does the halakha respond to what's happening, but does the halakha play an active role in terms of leading how the technology is going to happen? And it could be, I don't think it's a coincidence that it's not the only factor, but it's certainly one of the factors that when we talk about this meat that's being developed. So you look at the first articles that were written 10 years ago, the first, I don't want to call them piskei halacha, because at that point it was so new and it was so initial and it was just initial thoughts. But everybody was talking about a certain system, a certain product, which was based on muscle cells. Muscle is another word for meat. Right, so the companies were taking the cells from the muscle of the cow, cells which come from a piece of meat, a very small piece, is microscopic, but you take the cells, you grow in a lab, develops into meat. Now the conclusion may be one way or the other way. Now, today, there's still a company in Holland that's producing it in that way, but no one in Israel is producing it in that way. There are probably 4 companies, maybe more, that are all working on this in different ways, and they're all using different cells, egg cells, this cell, that, whatever it is. And it might be, I think, that one of the factors is the fact that if it's from meat, it's much harder to say. There are still those who would argue that maybe it's Maariv or whatever, but if we're looking to make it kosher, so those when it's not coming from a meat cell, it's going to be much easier, and there's more room to have that discussion. And I think that that's been a factor in terms of the companies choosing their technologies and the way that it's being done. One thing which all the poskim recommended to all the companies from the outset, which they did not take them up on this, was that they said if you rather than taking cells from a living animal, if you were to take a cell from a slaughtered animal, you just have to slaughter one cow and you take the cells from there, so that's going to be kosher l'kol hadayot, right? You could in fact have the most mehadrin meat ever. Right, you could slaughter a few cows. You could find the one that meets all the chumras of everybody. Bring in the badats or machmur or landau, everybody. Right, get a super kosher cow, and from that take the cells, and from that develop it. For various reasons, the company said thank you, but no thank you. We prefer to work with living cells from a living animal for technological reasons, sustainability reasons, or philosophical reasons, whatever it may be. So now the question is more. We're closer to the stage of an end product that already exists, and as has always been the case, halakha is to be reactionary again to a certain extent and say, what do we say? How do we look at this? But so there are, as I mentioned, so there are a number of different companies doing this, a number of different ways that it's being done. And what's really fascinating, in Israel, most of the meat that's being grown is being grown from eggs, whether it's from chickens or from cows. I'll explain in a moment. Right? You'll tell me that cows don't have eggs, certainly not in the same way that chickens do, but they have egg cells, right, which every mammal has, and it's something a little bit different, but maybe it's the same. And this is where things get really fascinating. So if you look at the cultured chicken, as it's called, where essentially what the companies are doing is taking an egg, a chicken egg, and from that you are extracting cells and creating a piece of chicken. Okay, so we know that an egg, and again, we're so used to it, but it's counterintuitive when you think about it, right? An egg is something which emerges from the animal. There is certainly a point we learned in the Shiur recently, that there's a certain point when the egg is still inside the chicken, at a certain point of the development, it's still considered flesh, it's still considered basar. And only at a certain point later, and there's machloket tanaim and machloket rishonim, exactly when that point happens and when that occurs, that it no longer is considered flesh. But at that point, it becomes parav, and it becomes an independent entity, and you can eat it. But it's not a simple thing. It's not a simple thing. And the Gemara talks about eggs, and it talks about milk, and talks about all these things which come from animals, which is not so simple to say that actually it's not considered, it's not meaty, but parav, or in the case of milk, it's milky, right? That is something which comes out of the animal. So what you see from there also is something fascinating, that the egg starts off as being flesh, starts off as being meaty, and at a certain point, it changes to parav. That means that things can change, right? Something that started off as parav, it's not necessarily the case that it's always going to be parav at a later stage in its development. Something that started off as meaty may not always be meaty. So these are the questions, and now we have a brand new situation. We have to try and understand how it works. So in the case of chicken, nonetheless, we take a chicken egg. According to everybody, a chicken egg is kosher, it's permitted for consumption, an egg that's been laid, right? It's not ever minachai. We'll discuss why, but it's not ever minachai. It's not fleshik, it's parav, and it's completely kosher and it's completely parav. So if you take a cell from that egg, which is kosher and is parav, and you grow something else from that, so you might say, on the one hand, okay, well, it's kosher and it's parav. It started off as kosher and parav. It finishes off as kosher and parav. Only things are that simple, right? But as I just explained, that from the development of the egg itself, you learn that just because it started as parav doesn't mean it ends that way. So in the same way that the egg could go from meaty to parav, maybe the egg which is being transformed back into meat could go from parav to meaty. Maybe. I'm not giving a final answer here, but that is essentially, there the question would be, do we look at what we started off with, or do we look at what we end off with, the end product? How do we determine the halachic status of it? Again, as I say, because it comes from an egg, which according to everybody is going to be kosher, it's very, very likely that it will be kosher. Whether it's meaty or parav, that's a separate question. Where this takes a very, very interesting twist, we don't have time to talk about now, is when we take an egg cell, a fertilized egg from a cow, which was not really known that such a thing existed in the days of Chazal. And now, do we compare, we're turning that entity itself into meat, turning that into a food product, which has never been done before. Do we compare it to a chicken egg? Is it the same thing? Is it something different? Is it flesh? Is it waste? What is it? That's the question. Rabbi Hanania ben Akasha Omer,